reasons. But I'm guessing it's more because the difficulty in traveling, being on the roads when it rains. So at Blue Cliff and also in Plum Village, we continue that tradition. And it's a wonderful tradition where it's a great gift and a great luxury, just knowing that you will stay put in one place and you minimize so many different projects and minimize going outside so much, and we get down to the practice, let's say. How much better we are at it at the end of 90 days, I don't know, but the point is getting down to the practice during these 90 days. And for this winter, it's a little bit of a different feeling for me because 6 of our eldest brothers and sisters in this community are not here with us right now. They'll be back in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I think. And I feel like we're, children being left at home by ourselves. There's a bit of that feeling, and suddenly you have to, I don't know, if you have to take care of the electric bills and you don't really know where the checkbooks are. That's actually what I did yesterday. Anyhow, I found the checkbooks. So there will be more worries for my elder brothers and sisters when they come home. I try to be responsible about signing checks. So today I would like to continue the Dharma talk that Thay gave on Thursday for some of you who are here about fear. I remember when I was younger, I was afraid of so many things, and even one of the fears was the fear of being afraid. I was afraid of being afraid. And every time, if I was about to be afraid of something, I remember that fear of being afraid would come up, simultaneously, and it would amplify my fear even more. And the Buddha calls that the second arrow. Like if you were struck by a first arrow, you would feel the pain only once. The pain would be only so much. But if you were struck by a second arrow in the same place, the pain will be 10-fold, 20-fold, 100-fold. So that was how I felt about fear. Back then, at one point, little fear would come up. I would be so afraid of being fearful at the same time, and I just started a spiraling effect, and it kind of paralyzed me in a way. So today I thought we could list out a number of our fears. On Thursday, Thay covered 2 kinds of fears already. I'd like to write them. So on Thursday, Thay spoke about the fear of death or dying. And also the fear of failure. And I don't know for you in your own lives, the kind of fears that you have. Maybe we can list some of them now if you're not afraid to share them? Yeah, any?
Fear of disappointing other people.
Okay. Fear of disappointing others. Physical pain. Mm-hmm.
Fear of not being good enough.
Would it be almost the same as this? Okay. Not being good enough. Fear of anxiety and panic. So like fear in it, fear of fear itself. Fear, okay. And panic. Okay. Uh-huh. Fear of the unknown. Mm-hmm. Conflict. Okay. Any? Yeah? Scary monsters, okay. Okay. Yeah?
Yeah, drugs.
Drugs, okay. You can put that somewhere. I saw a hand there.
Like making a choice that might end up hurting someone.
Okay, maybe hurting someone. Hurting. Okay. So, I remember in one of the talks that Thay gave that gave me a lot of insight into my own fears and started allowing me to look more deeply into my fears was a talk he gave about our deepest fears and about our deepest desires. And he said, our deepest fear is the fear of dying. That's our primary fear, actually, because that's the first fear we had when we were first born. The moment we were born, let me backtrack a little bit. So our primary fear is the fear of dying. And our primary desire is the desire to live. Because when we were first born, that moment of birth, we came out, and that's the first fear. Our crying is to be able to get the air into our lungs. And our first desire was the desire to take that first breath to live. And along with that, our first fear was the fear of dying. And this is very ingrained in us, a very natural kind of fear and a natural kind of desire. But when he paired the two, fear and desire, something clicked in me and allowed me to look at my fears in terms of my desires. And the more I looked into it, the more I saw that my fear and my desire were like mirror images of one another. For every fear I had, there was a mirroring desire. So if we could just take a moment to write down, if we could identify the mirroring desire to these fears. I'm going to write, this could be. This is just so we can see our fear more clearly. Because Thay emphasized this time and time again, the signlessness of things. Like the flower is made of non-flower elements. So our fear too is made of non-fear elements, and one of those elements include our desire. So the mirroring of death, fear of death, would be the desire to live, or desire for life. Failure, success. Fear of disappointing others, approval. Fear of hurting others. Pardon? Helping others. Or you want them. You want them to be okay. How's that? You want them to be well. Physical pain. Pardon? Your desire to be pleasure, or maybe desire to be normal, physically, normal functioning, healthy. Not being good enough. Pardon? Acceptance. Drugs. Okay, your desire to be drug-free, sober, yeah. Okay, sober. Have you had drugs? Just anxiety and panic. Calm. Fear of unknown. Certainty. Conflict. Peace. Resolution. Yes, harmony. Scary monsters. Friendly monsters? Like teddy bears? Okay. Friends. Okay, I'll put friends. Right there. So you see, just by writing out the other side of the fear, there's a little bit more understanding about it already. And all of this, all of these desires has a base in our perceptions or our view of happiness, actually. Would you agree that all of these, each one of these elements is kind of a little definition of what it is for you to be happy, yeah, to have these elements. And on the other side, these are a few of the things that might lead to your suffering. And so we can say, our idea of happiness. And we can look a little bit deeper into our ideas of happiness. Thay says that one of the biggest obstacles for our happiness is the ideas we have about happiness, what it's like to be happy. Like if I were to live and not die, I'd be happy. If I were to succeed and not fail, I would be happy. Approved by others, I would be happy, etc. and etc. It's worthwhile, I think, and for me during this winter retreat, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because this is the exact topic that I'm looking into, and coming back to myself and examining the different ideas I have for my own happiness and the fears underlying, so that I can handle them better. I want to get back to this mirror, the mirror image, the mirroring effect between fear and desire. In my experience, because it's like a mirror, you place an object in front of a mirror. When the object is there, the reflection is there, and they're there at the same time, right? If you take away one, then the other is also not there as well. So if I take the desire away, the fear is also not there as well. And I'll give an example of this. Thay, in 2005, one of our teacher's greatest wish was to go back to return to his home country, to return to Vietnam. And in the beginning, there were so much negotiations that had to happen with the Vietnamese government for that trip to happen. And at one point, the government was not budging, and also they were forcing some conditions for the trip to happen. And it was very tight on negotiations. So one of our eldest brothers who represented Thay during the negotiations, at one point he said, okay, so we call off the trip. And this was a very big deal for Thay to be able to come back to Vietnam after 40 years being in exile. But our eldest brother told the other party that, okay, we will call off the trip and consider it no more. And when he reported back to our teacher, he said, Thay said, you understood me very well. You understood me very, very well. And he was very proud to have a student that understood him very well. and he said his disciples saw the scope of Thay's freedom and understood how important it was for Thay to be free rather than to be caught by his desire to come back to Vietnam at the same time. Because if you have that desire to go back, they know it. And along with that desire is the fear of not being able to go back. So, if you're ever in negotiations, business, government, whatever, I guess that's why they say don't tell them what you want or don't let them know what you actually want. Because there's always a fear behind there, and people would play off of this fear. And Thay will not act out of fear, because to accept the conditions that were put on for that trip at that time would be to act out of fear. And because also at the same time Thay saw clearly his desire and the nature of his desire. It wasn't just to go back to Vietnam. When Thay looked, when I see that Thay going back to Vietnam or not, it wasn't just about going back to Vietnam. He saw that he was already there. So he could let go of that desire. And the moment he let go of that desire, he was also free of the fear. And so we can look at each one of these desires and see where their roots are, see where the roots are. And some of its roots, most of the time, lie in our idea of happiness, but our idea of ourself. Our ideas of permanence. And last Thursday, Thay had already covered about the death and dying, but I would like to repeat a little for those who are not here. We have ideas about what death is and what life is, and it's like very linear. Like this is the moment of birth, this is the moment of death. So we're born here and we think this is our lifespan. This is us. And after that, we are no more. And before that, we were not. And for many of us, this is our idea of life. And we're encouraged to look deeply into this, because before we were born, it's not that we didn't exist, we didn't come from nowhere. That we came from nowhere, but we were already there in our parents, in our society, in many of the conditions. When we look back, we were already there in our parents and our grandparents, in the many generations before. And so the moment we are born, we consider it just a moment of continuation. And we see that life is just continuing. And the moment that we die is that it's not that we become nothing. We continue on in other forms. Maybe a kind word you've said to someone has, even after you die, it continues in their heart and they pass it on to the next person. In a way, that kindness is a part of you that's continued on. Not to mention the physical, the ashes or the bones or the etc. that, if you were buried, it will become a part of some other critters that, when they consume the corpse, etc. So it's a continuation. And once we break free from that idea of birth just being this one point, and death being at this one point, and recognize that in every moment life and death are happening, we can remove that fear of dying, because in that death is life. In that life is already death. So you can remove that fear. And so I want to address some of these other desires that I think have a base in our idea of self, mainly maybe success, approval, even health, acceptance. There was an experiment made by a very, I guess he's a prominent neuroscientist of our time. I don't know his name. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Ramachandran or something like that. But he did I read about an experiment that he did that was very insightful for me as to how I view myself. It was a very simple experiment. He would just one of your hand would be placed under a table surface, and on the table, so one hand would be placed under, and it would be free from your view, so you would only see the table surface. I don't know how many of you know this experiment. Okay, you do, wonderful. So then what he did was he would tap the surface of the table and tap your hand simultaneously, right? So you would see this, you would feel just your hand being tapped, but you would see the surface of the table being tapped. And he would tap it like that, and then he would move to the right. If he moved to the right, he would, on the table, he would move to the right, tapping your hand. And if he moved to the left of the table, he would move to the left, tapping your hand. And after a while, you would see that this table was actually you being tapped. You would feel this table as being you being tapped. And at one point, he would get a hammer and hit the table, and your stress responses would be as if your own hand was being hit by this hammer. So at one point, you had extended your idea of yourself to this table. This table had become a part of, your body, almost like. And when I read that, it was strange because, I noticed this in my daily life. In my living quarters, for instance, so I don't. Before, I would, I have the bed and the table, and of course, if someone came and used it, without permission or something, I would feel violated in some kind of way. Or if you sit close to someone and, if you sat on a chair with armrests and the next person, and I've had this before in theaters or in airports or, on airplanes, where the next person would lean his arm against my armrest and I would feel violated. And I often ask myself, why? And that's because I'd considered that chair to be a part of me, and my idea of myself had extended to that chair. I don't know if this is going to make sense to you. Is it making sense to you? Okay. I was going to put up here a $20 million home or because many of us, not many, but some of us want to have a $20 million home, or even the iPhone 6. And it's very much the same idea, because we are used to hearing, we define, things, clauses like, don't define yourself with certain things, and yet we do it all the time without realizing that we do define. And it's a very natural part of how our mind works, though. So in our daily life, when we practice mindfulness, is to help us to be aware of these tendencies of identifying ourselves with certain things. In our community, we have, a growing number of electronics, personal electronic gadgets, and yes, we're monks and nuns, but we also use, laptops and computers, and some of us have iPods or etc. And sometimes I do recognize the fear, in having these iPods or these electronic gadgets, because when it's dropped, especially when it's dropped, then suddenly that fear of losing it comes up, and sometimes I worry for some of my brothers and sisters how caught up, if we are even caught up. I'm just assuming. I'm sure you guys know how to practice with it. So how to recognize that, so that in our daily life we're not so consumed by our desires or our fears. So my whole point is, you have this idea of yourself maybe, and it may be extended to, our idea of self may be vast, actually quite much more vast than we think it is, or it could be more narrow than we think it is. Most of the time it's more vast than what we think it is. And it could extend to objects around us, tables, possessions. It could also extend to people and their approval or disapproval. Etc. For instance, when we look at at the desire for others to approve of us is because we have an idea that we want others to see us in a certain light, right? And we don't want others to see us in a certain light. That's why the fear of disappointing others is there. And it all has to do with perceptions, how others are perceiving us, or how we are perceiving others as perceiving us. And is this all we are? How we want others to see us, is that really who we are, or is that all we are? I think every day when we practice to come back to ourselves, we learn to understand a little bit more about ourselves. Would you like to invite them? My sister's been waiting. For instance, if you practice mindfulness of drinking tea, you'll pick up on many different things about yourself just by being mindful about how you drink tea. For instance, how much sugar do you put in your tea? Or how do you pick up the cup when you are making yourself that cup of tea? Are you in a hurry to do something else? Are you... how are you making that cup of tea? When you practice mindfulness of making tea and drinking tea, you'll notice the different habits that you have. Some of us, we just rip the instant tea bag, put it in, drink, and it's as if we have an obligation to drink tea before doing something else, rather than taking our time and just enjoying. There's nothing that is pushing us or trying to get us to make the cup of tea faster. Nothing but ourselves. No one but ourselves are making us make that cup of tea in any way, except for our own habits. So how are we making that cup of tea? How are we drinking that cup of tea? We can learn quite a lot about the extent of our freedom, actually. Because sometimes you can drink tea and totally forget that you're drinking tea, and you've lost those moments of living. And how many moments that we lose throughout the day because of that, like that. Mindfulness can help us to be more present, can help us to be more alive, and really be there to savor what's happening in our lives. Not just to savor what's happening in our lives, but also to understand what our habits are, what are the energies pulling us, so that we can look more deeply into them and be more free of them. So I wanted to share an experience that I had. And it had a little bit to do with this as well. One time I was sleeping and getting into sleep. I was on my bed and I heard a conversation, and it had a little bit to do with me. And then I said, "Oh, it's not so right. I'm lying here and listening to this." And then I thought maybe I should get up and go do walking meditation. And then but I didn't. I was just lying there because I didn't want to disturb the conversation, for one. But I didn't want to listen in onto it either. And it was such a weird position to be in. I was just, lying there, but it's a very weird position to be in at that time. And I thought, well, maybe I should go out and do walking meditation, and so I don't have to listen to this. And, we're taught if something disturbs us, then we go and do some walking meditation or do anything to calm us down before we act out, we react. So I thought, oh, maybe I should do that. But I didn't. I just lied there and I followed my breathing. And that calmed me down a little bit. But this desire of going out to do walking meditation was still there. And I kept, going back and forth with it. But I still was just coming back to my breathing. And then an insight came up. And I was very happy that it came up. And that was, I wanted to go out and do walking meditation because I wanted, in a way, protect myself and my well-being. Because I felt I was hurt and I needed to take care of that hurt. And by doing walking meditation, I would be able to take care of that. So in a way, the walking was to protect myself and my well-being. And then I thought, but what was I protecting exactly? What? There was nothing to protect. There was absolutely nothing to protect at all. Because the conversation that I heard was full of perceptions. And here I was lying there, also full of perceptions about myself. And what I wanted to protect was a perception of myself. And the moment I realized, no, there was absolutely nothing that needed protection. But at the same time, that need to protect, to go out and do walking meditation still came up. So the only thing I had left to do was to thank myself for wanting to protect me. And I found that was very, very useful, actually. Yes, okay, well, thank you for wanting to protect yourself. Thank you for wanting to keep you safe, but it's okay. And there's nothing that's threatening you at this moment. And as soon as I told myself that conversation, I went into a very wonderful sleep and was not bothered anymore. But I realized from that experience, one, I had to recognize the boundaries of myself and where they lie, like in my perceptions. And the other part was there are very natural tendencies in us to protect. Even anger, when it comes up because in a way you want to protect something. You want to protect yourself of something. And it's okay. So for me to calm down my need to protect, without suppressing it, I had to acknowledge it. And I think mindfulness, that's what makes it so powerful. Because it's just the practice of mere recognition. You simply acknowledge that it's there. And in time, that acknowledgement gives you a lot of insights, a lot of yeah. That, for me, that acknowledgement allowed me to move forward with that incident. So, I think when we deal with our fears, when they come up, it's very wise to, first of all, recognize that it's there, and simply do just that. You just see that it's there. You don't have to react. You don't have to act yet out of it. And slowly, you can use your mindful breathing to calm down your fear, or you can use your walking meditation. You can do a million different kinds of meditations. Meditation, drinking tea, to calm down your fear. Or not necessarily to calm down, but just to hold it. And you get some insight into your fear. What's the other side of it? What is it that you want? Can you let that go? Is that already there? For instance, some of us when we seek approval of others. Sometimes we have a lot of approval, like everybody else is has approved of us, but maybe one or two people. And we're so focused on that one or two persons that we think we're not being approved. So, when you look deeply into this desire to be approved, you see the scope of it more, the larger scope of it. It's not just that desire to be approved. How are you being approved? Are you approved yet? You have to ask yourself many other questions as well. I find the desire to be loved is also one of them too. Sometimes we fear losing love so bad that we forget to look at the kind of love we have, and if it's something that we really want, And the moment we recognize, no, maybe this isn't the kind of love I want, then you lose that fear of, you lose that fear of losing that person's love, because you see the nature of that love. Maybe it's not exactly nourishing you or the both of you. Yeah. So I think this talk is just an invitation for you to look more deeply for us to look more deeply into our fears and our desires. What's the basis? What are the perceptions behind these fears and desires? So that we can be more free, and freedom is the basis of happiness. Well, thank you very much for listening.